Sarah and I are going to talk about Customer Experience 2030, which, now that we're just into 2020, kind of feels like a long way off. But I was sort of reflecting this morning that it's if you think 10 years back and how customer experience has changed from 2010 to 2020, it's actually not an enormous amount of time that has passed. So I'm very glad to have Sarah here. Sarah is head of marketing for Adobe's digital experience business. So for those of you who don't work with Adobe, this is the business that makes all their MarTech and ad tech platforms and technologies. We have an extensive relationship. We're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about customer experience. So Sarah, maybe if I can start by just sort of exploring a little bit, just to give people context, how what the remit of your role is, how it works with other functions in Adobe. We're going to get to a discussion around the role of the CMO at some point, so I think it'll be quite interesting to contextualize it.
Perfect tee up. Is there vodka in here? We can have a fun discussion today. No, so my role, I actually joined Adobe about 1.5 years ago through the Marketo acquisition. I was the CMO at Marketo for about a year before that acquisition occurred, and then came into Adobe. And this past June, Shantu and I had many conversations about what the future of marketing was going to look like, especially as we were growing our Experience Cloud portfolio in that business, and who our buyer is and what they need, because that's what Marketo's bread and butter was forever, was really studying that and serving the needs of the marketer. So we talked a lot about how marketing has to be a growth engine for a business. And to do that, it's got to be, number one, incredibly close to the customer. It can't be a function that sits inside of, the walls of the company and doesn't get out and get in the mix and understand intimately and empathize with customers and their needs. That's number one for anything we do as marketers in any discipline, I think, in any industry. But beyond that, we talked a lot about what does driving growth in 2020 and for really the next 5 years for our business look like? And as we try to scale as a company, what functions need to come together to do that? So we brought together all of the demand generation functions, including digital and field marketing, as well as our sales development organization, which for those of you that have worked in the B2B world, there's ebbs and flows and trends of how sales development is outside of marketing, and then it's back inside of marketing, and then it's outside. And so it's for Adobe, I think it's an exciting experiment because it gives us the ability to align more closely with, again, the early stages of when we're starting to get to know our customers and understanding their needs. And it helps us also, I think, just get smarter about the products we build and how we go to market with them. So it includes all of those functions, and then we have marketing operations, marketing technology that we brought into the group that was formerly in kind of a corporate structure as well. Again, just to get us close to the customer, closer to the business's needs, and to really obsess and immerse ourselves in it day in and day out.
And I think being a marketer in Adobe is sort of a very, very exciting role, right? Because on the one hand, you're working with the preeminent software company in marketing technology, but on the other hand, also, Adobe has really been at the forefront of defining marketing as experience. So for those of you who've been around for a couple of years, you'll remember that it's probably 4 or 5 years now ago where Ann Lunis started talking about Adobe being an experience company, and talking about, even if you think about the early renaming of products, when you renamed CQ5, the old Day software product, you chose to call it not some kind of, Adobe CMS, you called it Adobe Experience Manager.
Yep.
And even if you think about your platform strategy now for product, for customer data, it's called the Adobe Experience Platform. So, talk a little bit about that sort of decision for Adobe to think about their role in the ecosystem and the value for clients as providing experience services. Because I think it's not entirely intuitive, right?
No, yeah, and I think it was interesting because I have also an outside-in point of view as I was coming into the company trying to understand the same thing, and also working with Ann and getting to know her and her team and how they had made those decisions over the years based on how they got to know our customers and really understood the market need and what was really starting to connect and resonate. And we had done something similar at Marketo. We had been focused more on engagement. We had an engagement platform. But experiences are what we're all architecting. We're all the authors of that for our customers, no matter what type of industry you're in or no matter what type of customer you serve. And so for our company, we really have been focused on that for many years, but hadn't really called it out. And I think putting the basis for the future of how we support our customers on the platform and calling it the experience platform, because that's what, again, it architects for our customers, made the most sense. But it is all about customer experience, because if you don't start there, you have nothing. I mean, that's really the point of why we get out of all of bed in the morning, I think. And so I think for us, that was a really important thing to call out and put it, obviously, in as many places as possible. There's a whole lot of experience
right.
all over our portfolio, but it is our mantra, it's our mission, it's our MO, and I came in and really, that resonated with me as a marketer, and I think that's part of why it resonated with so many of Adobe's customers as they were starting to move in that direction over the last 5 years.
But it's a really interesting definitional problem if you think about it, because if you, as you said, if you think about experience more expansively, then customer experience is really much wider than what the Adobe software stack enables.
Yeah.
It's brand, it's retail experience, it's the call center experience, it's the actual product, it's what the product sounds and feels and kind of smells like. There's so many aspects of customer experience in the broader context. So. The one thing I often think about when I come to shows like Adobe Summit and you talk about customer experience and Adobe being the experience business, etc., is this challenge that you enable many customer experiences, but marketers and product people and brand people have to think way beyond what you enable in order to do their work. So you're sort of in this tricky situation where it's become a really good marketing vehicle and marketing hook for Adobe. But I do see marketers fall into this trap of thinking if they execute programs that utilize all the functionality that Adobe offers, they are doing customer experience.
Yeah, and it's a great point. We actually talk about this a lot. Amit Ahuja, who runs our strategy group, and I spend actually a lot of time on this topic because we started to. It gave us a bit of a beacon, if you will, of how we were thinking about our entire portfolio when we baselined around experience, because you're right, we have key categories we're aware of. When you think about even just, communities and customer engagement call centers around almost kind of the post-sale aspect of engagement and experiences that are even more important after you sell to a customer, because obviously the renewal cycle is critical for all of our success, but also just retaining our customers and making sure that they feel well served. And that's something we talk about a lot. We focus right now on making sure as we build out our platform that it's fully able to integrate with any of those partners, because we have many of them, and they're great partners and they have great products. But there's a future state where Adobe was looking at those same gaps when they decided to acquire Marketo.
Yeah.
Because they didn't really have a solution that was serving the very unique needs of the B2B marketer, and Marketo did that quite well. So what we've kind of done over the years, long before I can take credit for it, is start to look at where those gaps are and figure out, do we create deeper partnerships and relationships where there are leaders in the space, and it's not necessarily where Adobe should be building or owning something, but should be the very best partner and the most open partner possible to unlock that, but to make sure that the collective view of experience isn't all just owned by Adobe. It's about the ecosystem around Adobe and the core of what Adobe has built.
And it's a challenging process from a kind of a product management and product marketing perspective, right? Because you start with AEM as the kind of the core foundation. You add on campaign, you add on an ad server, you add on now more recently Marketo for B2B marketing. You add on Magento for commerce. And sort of there's one element of defining what that entire suite now looks like from a product marketing perspective, but there's also, of course, the technical integration and the unification of the end user experience of those software platforms. And effectively, tying that all together through a customer data platform as well.
Yes.
So, how do you see the future of that product strategy as you think about experience more broadly? Do you see Adobe kind of in a linear way adding more and more, call them channel or customer interaction tools, maybe for voice or maybe for other things in the future that you don't have at the moment? Or do you see, the core portfolio, solidifying where it is now and you just focusing on partnerships to extend beyond that?
Yeah, I think it's every company has a slightly different approach to how they think about this, but as we were talking about, Adobe shouldn't choose to be the very best at building everything. That's in the best interest of every company. Like, there are things that we are incredibly great at building, and there are things that our partners are well positioned and have spent decades building out as well. So for us, it's just deciding where can we add and amplify the value of what our integrations look like, of how we go to market even with our partners in those spaces, and how do we think more specifically and intently about customer needs, so serving specific verticals in a partnership capacity as we do, but beyond, into the actual function and feature of what we either could build or buy or partner or what have you. We just want to make sure that whatever we are doing, we're actually unlocking more value for the end customer. I mean, that's pretty obvious and simple, but it's how we think about that and what we would, think that Adobe needs to have as a core part of its portfolio versus what we're just going to be partnering around. I think we're really focused right now on partnerships. We have two incredible assets that we acquired with the Marketo product and Magento, as you mentioned. And there's a lot of great work to do to integrate those products with the Adobe Experience Platform, as we've already started to do, but also with Creative Cloud, which is super awesome for marketers because that saves them so much time. And even as you think about Experience Manager and as you think about Audience Manager and all the integrations in Adobe Target, all the things that we can do to actually make it more efficient, even as just the first and easiest thing we can do for marketers inside of core products that they've recently acquired. That's where we're focused right now. If we're thinking about what we want to build, it's all about those integrations. And that work then still also benefits a lot of our partners as well because it's the same type of work that we're doing, again, at the foundational layer across our platform. So that's kind of how we think about it right now. But I think even to your point about channels, we even had this debate at Marketo. We've had this debate at Adobe. It's like, what's a fly-by-night and what's a trend that's here to stay that we can really add 2 to 3x value by, again, having as part of our core portfolio versus an integration? And is there additional value to having it in our core? Should we build it? Should we not? Often the answer is no, because there's players out there just doing it so well. And I think that's where we can be, again, a catalyst and a kingmaker for them and amplify what they're doing and in that channel help invest and grow and integrate. But that's it's an ongoing and it's an evolutionary exercise, as you could appreciate from a strategy point of view. But it's, for us right now, all about integration, all about the ecosystem, and all about making sure the things that we have invested in, we continue to add value from the other parts of our portfolio where we've got tons of opportunity to unlock and feature functionality, et cetera.
But it's an interesting thing as well, right? Because I think if you think about where Adobe's product strategy is going at the moment, you seem to be focusing very heavily on the customer data layer now with Adobe Experience Platform. And so instead of focusing on a kind of an ever expanding list of channel management tools, you are now focusing on customer data and analytics, orchestration, identity management as sort of the heart of experience management. And frankly, whether you then deliver the channel application or whether a third party does so through a partnership, it doesn't really matter, right?
Right.
I mean, is that the sort of a good?
It is, and it's also it's the most important part that no one's succeeded at even really attempting that yet. And I think we all know that there's bits and pieces of it that have been invested in, but making sure we have the most agnostic and open platform that integrates with every CRM, with every single possible data source, both known and unknown data, but also online and offline data, making sure we can connect the dots between the retail store experience as well as the digital e-commerce experience. We have all the capabilities to do that, and so that's unique to Adobe in some respects. It isn't just about the digital channels. It isn't just about one CRM. It's about all of the data sources that marketers in their real life have to use because it adds value to them. And I think that's where our whole discipline has struggled in the last couple of years, is everyone now has awareness of what they need, and we have to be able to personalize real time to target our customers and to engage with them. But there's still these silos. You now know where all the data is. You just know that it's completely in siloed, different, disparate places, and it's hard to action it still today in real time. And that's why we built the Experience Platform to begin with, because Adobe was uniquely positioned to do that and bring it all together.
So would you then say that, as we're thinking a little bit, to a customer experience 2030, that at the heart of being an effective experience management, sort of professional in 10 years' time would be to have a really strong core and strong capability in customer data management.
Absolutely.
Putting that at the heart of everything.
That's not 10 years, that's 2 years. And I think everybody is well aware of that. I do think it's making sure that the right technology does exist. And companies like ours and many others that do this are the right partner based on your unique needs. And that's making those decisions, but then also getting the right talent inside of our marketing organizations is the other limiting factor, where the technology is now there. Our teams have to be able to leverage it and to unlock the value that's in it. And that does take different skill sets than it ever has, or it takes different types of alignment with the CTO or the CIO. And for us, that's something that we're advocating a lot more for and starting to help invest both in just education around our customer base of where they need to focus and invest in talent based on the stages of their progression as a business and their maturity, but also what's coming next, like where they need to be starting to think and look, around the bend, and where they can partner to leverage that, where they shouldn't actually be acquiring talent, where they can have a great partner who can provide that for them.
And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the cycle of selling custom data platforms into the CIO or into the CTO of a company is very different from selling marketing applications into functional kind of leaders in the marketing organization. Talk a little bit about that in terms of the, maybe the shift in kind of, sales rhythm or, kind of the type of talent that you're needing to hire in order to sell that kind of core customer data solution into your clients.
It is different. It's speaking the language, and again, it's extreme customer empathy. We know the marketer at Adobe better than anyone, and I say that confidently. I used to say it at Marketo, and it was kind of true, but Adobe was always better. But that's not the challenge. We understand the needs of the marketer, but I think about it in the context of the marketer is still often going to be the catalyst for an investment, but the CIO has to be their first and closest partner in that process and in that journey. And they may be sharing the budget, they may be owning the budget, either way, but there still has to be a business need, a business catalyst, because the CIO is often, their remit is to, yes, drive innovation, and yes, to help with digital transformation, but it's also to be a great partner to their business leaders, and that's how they succeed. And the business leaders are bringing the customer's needs to the CIO. And I think for us, it's not as simple as saying we're going to now go just market to the CIO and go to market that way and sell straight into them. I think about it as almost enablement of the marketer. It's so much less about what we say to a CIO as it is what the marketer actually can convey and almost cross-sell to their peers. Because if they know they need it and they know what the value is they can get out of it, they're the ones who have to put their neck on the line many times. And the CIO has to be willing to put their neck on the line as well, based on their belief and their trust and confidence in what the CMO has conveyed is the need. And so I think it's an interesting dynamic where a lot of companies you'll see just go straight to, we're going to go sell to the CIO and that's it. We're doing that, yes, because we want to be incredibly communicative around where we are with security, scalability, stability, all the things that a CIO is going to really care about a lot, and checking all the boxes to make it easier for them to partner with us. And also risk mitigation, things like that are what CIOs think about often. And at the same time, making sure that the marketer can fully communicate and convey what the ROI is going to be across the business, not just to the CIO, but the CFO as well. So that's where I'm just starting to, again, think about that as how do we enable that for the marketer and cross-selling to their peers.
And that's a very big shift in direction, in content, and in remit, for Adobe, both as a marketing organization, but also as a sales organization.
Mm-hmm.
If I think back about the last couple of years as you migrated your sales organization from not only selling individual solutions or individual applications, but trying to sell multi-solution offerings to clients.
Yeah.
This is sort of taking it one step further, and now you're having to effectively convey an entire marketing enterprise architecture in a simple way to a bunch of marketers who then have to go and motivate it to their kind of technology partners. And it's not for people that have been in the field for 20 years, for 30 years, that have kind of learned every functional area technically incrementally. You get there eventually. But I mean, like Vineet was saying yesterday in the session with Lindsay, this sort of demand on a modern CMO to understand, marketing technology across customer data, advertising, content management, campaign management, analytics, etc. It's an enormously broad and complex range of content that you have to kind of consume, understand, digest, and then be able to kind of to make sense of. So how are you as a marketer, sort of going about, sort of conveying that content and and helping your clients demystify all that?
Yeah, I mean, I have a keen appreciation for the complexity of it because I deal with it every day. But I spend a lot of time. The best thing that I get to do is go spend time at our customer advisory board, or just going out, obviously meeting with customers, because I feel their pain, because we're both waking up at 4 or 5 a.m. thinking about the same and worrying about the same things. But whenever I think about how we structure content or how we go to, it's all about the pain. It's actually about what the impact of the pain is. And the impact is what actually then changes their lives, both personally and professionally. And I think for me, I've started to think a lot more about that and what the relationship is really like in many organizations between them and the CIO. And understanding those dynamics, and there's almost these archetypes of dynamics in different types of companies, and helping them solve for whatever that unique situation is for them. Sometimes they have a great relationship. They're communicating weekly, maybe every other day. And they've partnered and partner well, and they rely on each other, they trust each other, they co-invest in things, and that's ideal. And then there's other scenarios where they avoid each other at all costs, and it's always a tough conversation. And I think making sure that the marketer themselves has a full appreciation. Yes, we have to simplify. That is where I am keenly focused this year, is simplify, 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 because marketers have enough complexity to deal with every day. We don't need to add to that. And so we're really focused right now on just, again, understanding what the pain is, what the pain then translates into impact, and then how do we solve for that for them. And MarTech is just, I'm a nerd, and I freak out my team because I ask for access to every single tool, new tool. As soon as we get it, I'm in it. And they freak out, and then they track my activity. They're like, what are you looking for? I'm like, I don't know, but I'll know when I find it. But it is, it's incredible because it helps me also start to have a full appreciation for the steps in the process that a lot of the users are going through. And it all points back, I think, to me, to talent, because the CMO should never be spending their time trying to learn all the technical complexity. That they should actually be better at recruiting a leader who is that to run for them. So being great purveyors of talent is more important than anything else, because it's having awareness of what you don't have and where your gaps are and what your team's gaps are and what's coming next, and then making sure you are a rock star at hiring and recruiting for those type of roles, and then you trust those people to do the job. But anytime I've gone into an application, it's been when things are going off the rails, and I'm like, I want to see what's happening here, here, and here, and why. Yeah. And that's a waste of my time and my team's time, candidly. If I have the right leaders in place, then that's not an issue. It's something that you can fully trust. So.
But thinking about complexity, right? I think think about digital marketing applications over the last 20 years. They started out being quite simple because there were limited features and a couple of weeks of training and you can use them. And they've kind of swung to become quite complex and quite sort of quite a big ship in some cases. You need quite specialized skills to drive them. But the trend that I'm seeing at the moment is that there's a sort of democratization and an abstraction process going on where, partly through acquisitions like Marketo, which, for people that have worked in these tools, is sort of infinitely more user-friendly than say, Campaign, a sort of an on-prem customized Campaign standard.
I'll let you say that. I'm not allowed to say that.
But it is. But there's, that's sort of one example. But there's also if you think about the deployment model going from kind of, a software model to a managed service model to a completely SaaS model with things like Skyline and, your new kind of AM products. There certainly seems to be a trend and sort of probably a consumer or an end user driven requirement to create more simplification, more abstraction in these processes. So the question is, if you think about 10 years from now, do you think MarTech will become so abstracted, so streamlined, so automated, so intelligent that you don't need the CIO's team to implement and manage it anymore? It can just be a kind of a standard kind of integrated marketing toolkit that marketers without technical knowledge can use again. Do you think it's going to swing back, or do you think we just going to continue down this path?
It's a great question. I think it again depends on the maturity and the size of a business, because it's different everywhere. I don't think you ever want a scenario where the CIO and CMO's organization don't connect, because I actually think there's a lot of horsepower and insight that set of talent in the CIO organization can provide marketing. But yes, I know they would do cartwheels if they had to do. It's all about doing less customization and getting out of your own way. And bigger companies have more of this than smaller. Like, they're not encumbered as a smaller company a couple years into the game because you haven't been building out a custom webinar registration form. I don't know. There's weird things like that larger companies have done for different reasons over the years. You have different opt-in and opt-out systems that are, for Adobe, we have one that's across our whole company because obviously we have customers across every part of our business, Creative Cloud and Experience Cloud. And so there's custom things like that are really critical for our CIO. I don't want my team owning that kind of thing. because they have the technical know-how to do that. I do think, though, it's all about how do we reduce the amount of customization and how do we make that plug and play and how do we make sure that we're building out for all the majority of the use cases, if you will, as possible. And the usability is a factor, yes. I don't even, that's gonna, I think, be in a year or two for most businesses that aren't quite there yet. And I think, like for Adobe, Creative Cloud is the best example. Whenever they move toward the actual cloud and you can log in and procure any application out of 50 plus instantly through one single login, I mean, that did change the game, and that wasn't the case for most companies at that time. And we're following that same model with Experience Cloud, and it's a great model to follow because there's been, for us, I think, just again, the democratization of that across a marketing team, how marketing teams can scale and also use their partners and leverage partners for the most important work, not the administrative work that drives just slog in an organization. That's where we want to get to. But I think that CIO and CMO organizations partnering should forever be a thing. I think it would just be nice if it was all about innovation and progressive thinking about what we could do and partner together moving forward versus having to manage systems of the past. I think that'll be the bigger need that will be solved by a lot of the usability being streamlined.
Yeah, because it's interesting, right? If you think about the user base of Creative Cloud globally, it's probably factors of 100 larger than the user base of DX, right? I mean, it's just there's a much larger adoption. The products are more kind of entrenched and sort of more commonly used. I want to touch sort of change gears a little bit and just think more about the kind of consumer side or the kind of the end user sort of side of customer experience 2030, thinking about how consumers and customers every day are being marketed to and communicated to by brands. I talk in the plain things. So, if you think about the kind of evolution of, particularly digital marketing in the last sort of 25 years, there's this sort of, going from the, very, very kind of like green screen, text-based kind of interface to the GUI, and then to, touch and, kind of mobile devices, and now voice. There's this kind of progression of interface innovation that's been really interesting. And what's always interesting with these kind of innovations is that you tend to never lose the original thing. People are still typing into computers. People are still, kind of navigating with the mouse, even though most of us are spending most of our time with our thumbs and our phones. But all those kind of methods of interface are remain in place. You just add on and layer on. And voice is sort of the most recent one of that, where I think I had this conversation with one of my peers recently, and they were saying, well, what is the what's the I don't know of any kind of like large scale AI distribution that consumers are using. And I said, well, voice is AI, right? I mean, voice is a kind of a massively scaled expression of computer processing, which wasn't really, I mean, people have been working on it for 30 years, but it really is only recently that it's become good enough and reliable enough to use as an interface. So if you think about 10 years out from now, I mean, what's next after voice? And are we necessarily moving to sort of less and less friction in the human-computer interface? I mean, is that the necessary direction of travel, or where do you see it going?
Well, I'd actually love to hear your opinion on this too, just because of all the brands you work with. But I mean, I think, listen, if I can guess what's going to be the big thing in 10 years, then I should just go down to the roulette table right now and put it all out there. But when I think about what we've started to see, I do think that the interoperability between basically, bots and humans is a really interesting thing, and giving brands the control to decide when and how that occurs and what's the threshold and the point where that transition happens. As again, AI continues to mature and that gets even more, just pervasive across all products as a core foundational layer for everything. I think that will shift that dynamic and where that line is drawn, because more can then be automated. But I do think, I mean, there is still, and there will forever be something so powerful about the face-to-face interaction. It's why this event has, continued to grow. It's why events, oddly, will never go away, because we even more today than ever before crave human interaction. And I think that's going to be the interesting dynamic, is the innovation around how do we start to get even more intelligent about what happens in the real world, and then where do other things like artificial intelligence overlay the real world? And I think that becomes fun, and I think that's going to be, beyond. Obviously, voice alone is kind of just one of many different things. I get excited about that and the blending of the worlds that as they come together and the tracking of that in one consistent manner. And just being able to see the entire life cycle of how people live, like that from their personal to their professional lives and back and forth, like that. I get really nerdy about that, and that may happen long before 10 years from now, but I think we're on a journey toward that, and that's what I get excited about. But what are you seeing?
No, I mean, I think, there are some really interesting kind of real life experiments, I guess, which are sort of flipping the whole thing on its head. If you think about, how we are tracking customer experience in e-commerce and being able to path people through the site and see exactly what people are putting in their baskets and understand exactly what they're checking out and what activity correlates with a sales prediction, etc. That same digital experience, as it were, is now being replicated in Amazon Go stores. As a physical experience, right? So Amazon is tracking people throughout the Go store. They see exactly what they pick up, what they put in their basket, where they're moving through the kind of the retail environment. And so you have these sort of digital analogs of customer experience management being superimposed in the physical world, which is really interesting. But the other thing I'm seeing is that I think a lot of when we work with our clients in this area, a lot of people start with the assumption that less friction in the customer experience is the ultimate goal. In other words, make it as easy for people to transact, to work with you, etc. Take away as many interface points. Take away as much of the manual work, the stuff that takes time from the consumer. And I guess it's not a completely dumb sort of assumption, because you think about how effective things like not having to pay for a cab is when you're using Uber, right? They have your contact, you have your credit card details stored in the app, you go for your ride, you get out, you leave. You don't have that sort of awkward moment about, do I tip the guy? How much do I tip the guy? If you're in New York, is it 30% or 40% tip? It's like all that nonsense. It's a great customer experience just to be able to get out of the cab and leave.
It is.
But on the other hand, what a lot of our customers are seeing is that if you take away all friction, you lose brand.
Yeah.
Right? You lose the ability to actually differentiate. You lose the ability to create an experience because there's nothing. Right? There's sort of you go directly from thought to execution, and there's no way to actually create a kind of an interesting curated experience. So, if you think about the work that we do, for instance, with Yoox and Net-a-Porter. So Yoox is sort of a mass market fashion retailer. Net-a-Porter is very much high-end fashion, owned by the same Italian fashion house. And what's fascinating to work with them is that effectively they have one customer data platform across both products. They recognize customers who shop on Yoox and customers who shop on Net-a-Porter, and they do. But they are incredibly disciplined at having entirely different customer experiences in the one versus the other. Yeah. In Yoox, it's all about never having to search. Mm-hmm. Right? So their whole kind of approach in Yoox is, if a customer comes to our website, we want to show them 10 things they can buy immediately. That's it. It's kind of, dive into the bargain bin, grab a couple of T-shirts, a couple of, whatever, and get out. The Net-a-Porter experience is entirely different. It is full of friction.
Yeah.
You're forced to watch videos and browse and read and, get lost in some kind of fantasy about, summer and Capri. I mean, it's like, but...
It takes that to spend that much sometimes.
But that is exactly, when you have to spend $1 million a year. But that's sort of the, and I think that's where brands who are thoughtful about this, I think, are realizing that for some categories, for some products, creating friction, positive friction, right, is actually what CX is about.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interjecting when that opportunity exists and when there is a desire. And I think listening to the signals that tell you there's a desire for interaction or that there's value that can be added, again, in a frictionless way. I mean, it still shouldn't feel hard, but it's making sure that you can appear or emerge or engage at whatever level or whatever degree your customer needs you to at that moment in time. So I think we're only going to get smarter about that, and I get excited about that. That's in the next couple of years. That will continue immediately, not in 10.
Yeah. I mean, and one thing I think about a lot is, and it's this is really where CX is really, it's such an interesting way of approaching the problem, because, when in most of our CX practices across WPP, we think about CX as a completely channel or touchpoint agnostic experience, right? So we did a large project for a kind of a very large US retailer recently, where the CEO asked us to do a 2-week sort of sharp diagnostic on what were the kind of the key customer experience challenges that they faced. And this is kind of a massive, kind of scaled organization. And, through doing completely customer-centric research and kind of ethnographic walkthroughs and observational studies and so on, the number one thing that customers were frustrated about in the total customer experience was that your plastic shopping bags break when you walk from the till to the car. That was the number one thing that customers were frustrated about. And the CEO looked at this and he said, well, we're spending billions on digital marketing and websites and content and all this stuff. Why don't we just make the bags thicker? And I often think about things like that, where if you start the customer experience sort of investigation with an end state in mind, with a particular execution in mind, I think you often miss the opportunities for real impact and for kind of properly prioritized spend that can be very effective.
And let's do a few things really well versus all things okay. I mean, that's the constant battle, because I think also, again, whether you're in marketing, digital, e-com, doesn't matter. Everyone expects you to do all things always at the very best of your ability, and the dollars are never there to do all things that well, and the people and the time is never there. So I think you're so right, because you cannot do it all, and you cannot do it all really well. And you can focus and learn so much to do the next things really well, but not all at once. And it's like start, not even small, but just start focused in a way that you can actually make an impact and make a difference.
Well, and I think the other thing that's been really hard is we've seen a lot of our clients, particularly as they've kind of got into digital capability or digital marketing capability development in the last 5 years at scale as kind of an internal capability. They've kind of gone through this checkbox exercise of saying, right, we need to build a website, we need to have an app, we need to do social marketing, we need to do CRM, we need to do search, etc. And frankly, for some categories, I personally believe that a lot of that stuff is just not necessary.
Yeah.
You think about, pick a category, if you're a beer marketer, I can tell you through experience that no consumers go to beer.com websites. The people who frequent beer.com websites are the agency who built the website and the marketers who paid for them. That's the only people in the world who visit beer.com websites. So, should that category have websites? I mean, isn't that the right question to ask in the beginning? And I guess, back to our conversation about the Adobe suite in the beginning, would Adobe ever tell people, don't buy a AEM, that's not the right thing for your category?
Well, yeah, actually, I mean, we would have, and maybe not in that exact scenario, but I mean, I do think that's also the beauty of having a bit more of a, as the portfolio broadens and as our partner ecosystem broadens, it does, if we aren't a partner who can advise and be honest, like, we won't last anyway. It's not like, even if we do or don't sell someone something, isn't the real reality of the long-term relationship. It's about the guidance and the partnership we can provide to make our customers successful. So yeah, I mean, we tell people all the time tonight, and we actually this year just started, getting a little firmer with that, of not letting customers get in their own way with how they use products. So making sure that if they're taking a product to a limit and beyond and customizing things well beyond what is sustainable for them and their team to manage long term, it actually ends up harming them versus helping. And 5-10 years ago, we might have allowed it, and as we were growing and learning ourselves, and now we know what best practices are associated with things and what's going to hurt them, and we can see around the corner for them, and we don't let them do that now. And that's part of our role as a partner, and it has nothing to do, and candidly doesn't matter what the dollars are associated with it. It's like our relationship with them, we intend to be for life. So
it's a long game.
From company to company to company, not just in that one job and in that one need. So our relationship and our brand is based on that kind of guidance. We can always be the partner they pick up the phone to call when it's good and it's bad.
Yeah. So I want to close with a quick discussion on since we had CES, on the sort of a maybe a not a 2030 but maybe a 2040, 50 kind of view on customer
My gosh,
experience.
we're going so far out.
Why not, right? We might as well push it off. No, and I think a lot of this stuff is emerging and happening right now. But I don't know if you saw the Mercedes concept car, the sort of the avatar inspired Mercedes that they launched or showcased here this week. And what struck me about that car, which is sort of a I'll get to the point, is the fact that the entire car is controlled by this hand device that you put your hand on the sort of console in the middle of the car. It senses your pulse, your stress levels, it's almost the kind of the human machine interaction. It's a sort of avatar, hand that connects you to the car in a sort of almost like a futuristic way.
Yeah.
And as you know, if you're a geek, there's obviously a lot of development that's happening in the space. I mean, if you think about what Musk is doing with Neuralink and so on, there's a lot of innovation that's getting us to the point of humans not having to have interfaces to connect to each other, the internet, etc. I mean, personally, this idea of not having to type, or speak, into a device, and just be able to think things, and then, you can visualize a slide and it happens. You don't have to sit there for half an hour creating it.
Yeah.
You can, have a thought and it jots it down in your notebook. You don't have to, physically write it in the middle of the night. I find that kind of stuff super appealing. I mean, some people find it very creepy and sort of distressing, but I think the creating a more of a kind of a direct link between thoughts and ideas and execution, I find very interesting. So, I mean, how do you personally think about that? But also, how does Adobe, maybe even, specifically around Creative Cloud, think about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Creative Cloud, even with Experience Cloud and our I think about it, I immediately go to our platform, and honestly, the way that, we capture data today and the actions that are taken by an end customer, it doesn't really change how we capture that data. I get excited because it's just another source of insight. It's another way to listen. The really fun thing is going to be, how do you interpret that? And how do you combine that and interpret it in combination with other actions and behaviors that are more explicit? Because those are going to be a bit more passive and observed. Yeah. And it's going to be, I mean, at the same time, there's a fine line. It'll be so fascinating once we get to that point to start to talk about the privacy piece of it. Yeah, exactly. And how do you think about, even when there is no interface and there is no, the things that we know and understand today being the opt-in, opt-out, what does that look like in that context? And how, can privacy almost be boxed and temporary in some respects, and pop-up privacy kind of parameters around certain scenarios in your life? And I think that's going to be exciting because it's a fun problem to solve. And I think that no matter what, like, we're going to be constantly and obsessively focused on how do we make sure, again, we can ingest and pull in any data source from any action, any behavior. And I would imagine as we build things like that out in the next 5, 10, 20 years, like, they'll be even more structured and more actionable than what they would even be today. And I think it'll make all of our jobs as marketers easier, but our job from a core platform point of view and with the partners and other, everything from the public clouds and the other CRMs that are going to be capturing that data, we've got to be great partners to them and be open and transparent as that type of trend evolves to how we build toward that and we get ahead of it versus playing catch up once it does happen.
Well, and the point is, it is kind of happening already today, right?
Yeah.
And I think with a lot of these things, it's sort of, what sounds scary and futuristic now, it's like that sort of, boil a frog slowly kind of analogy, right? So people get used to the idea of their personal data, their actions, etc., being recorded or being kind of stored.
Right, yeah.
There's some regulatory backlash. They then get, more used to managing that data. But ultimately, if you think about, if you're I don't want to name specific names, but if you are the user of a mapping product, an email product, a search product, from one platform, the proxy for your life is actually pretty close. What you're searching for, what you're interested in, where you're going, how much time you're spending there, what are you saying to your friends, what they're saying to you. I mean, all these things are effectively captured in data.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that it's effectively, this is data that you've either opted into proactively or data that you've entered, is part of it, but a lot of it's passive, right?
Yeah.
A lot of it's, the relevance of an image search is imputed. It's not express.
Yeah.
The sort of your kind of mobility in terms of your commute and where you go and where, how much time you spend at coffee shops and restaurants, those things are opted in, but once you've said it, you forget it, and you don't realize the kind of the graph that creates on you as a person, right?
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
Even though we can't access our thoughts entirely yet, I mean, it's getting pretty close, right?
Yeah, which is exciting. Scary and exciting.
So on that note, I'm going to open it up for a couple of questions from the audience, if there are any. I know it's getting nice and warm in the sun, so I think people are probably quite relaxed.
You guys are getting a tan.
Andy?
So there was a lot of great discussion earlier about experience as being part of the Experience Cloud marketing. And I'm just curious as to how that extends to the Commerce Cloud.
Yeah.
And then from the customer's experience, especially like a pre-existing Magento customer, how is that being received as Experience Cloud and Commerce Cloud coming together?
Yeah, so I get really so commerce is such a it's so great that the Magento acquisition occurred because I wasn't here and had nothing to do with it, but I walked in the door and it's one of the it's the kind of final stage of all of the work that you do beforehand is that's where it's realized. And so that was actually the first product where we got really deep around that integration with how we're going to be able to bring assets from Experience Manager into the Commerce Cloud and into Magento, and making that automated and making sure that we can also start to underpin Sensei across those products and get smarter about obviously whether it's which images are actually going to be able to convert at higher rates, and making it just more efficient for the marketer to execute across that with the audiences that they're going to be using and targeting. And it's so exciting about the data around shopping and how we can think about connecting that back to all of the other inputs and sources that we have across our ecosystem. So from just that point of view, we're focused very heavily on how we're integrating Experience Manager across all dimensions today with our Commerce Cloud. But even you think about inventory management, all the other things that are kind of not as the biggest headlines around Magento, but there's so many interesting things that are there and data sources that are there. There's a lot of exciting opportunity for innovation. And we even are starting to see a lot of B2B companies are starting to have needs in e-commerce in unique ways that you just wouldn't expect. And that's creating really interesting opportunities around how do we bring Marketo and Magento together? What does that look like? Where can we add value to, again, connect dots throughout the entire life cycle of a personalized journey? So that's actually one of the things I get nerdy about when I think about this next year. So.
But ultimately, if you think about it, I mean, using Experience Manager consistently across all platforms, whether it's content, commerce, ads,
everything.
CRM, is really kind of the end state, right?
It is. It will underpin everything, and I mean Marketo included, Magento included, but figuring out then what's next and what does that then look like for the marketer, and how do we take the intelligence that we'll start to get from that, and then again, basically give it back to them to use is what we're also thinking through, and so more to come.
Excellent. Any last questions? No? So thank you very much,
Yeah,
Sarah.
thank
Thanks
you.
for coming. Enjoy the rest of CES.
Great, thanks guys.